Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have Dan MacQueen on the show. I say good morning, good afternoon. I know you're in Vancouver, I'm in the UK. But anyway, good to see you, Dan, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Julian, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, good to have you. And just tell the audience a little bit about you. You are a survivor of 2 emergency brain surgeries. I've had to relearn how to walk, talk, and smile again. And you're now a keynote speaker on resilience, incremental improvements that compound over time, and these can lead to significant results. And we're going to get into exploring your brain injury, what you learned from that, and then looking at how the power of taking the next steps. But before we get into that, Dan, I'd just like to ask, what do you love about what you do now?
Well, thank you for having me, Julian. I appreciate you having me on the show. What do I love about what I do right now? I think it's I'm as a keynote speaker, as you mentioned. I think when I drop a little nugget on stage or in front of a crowd, and someone just gives me this. Oh, I never thought about it that way. Look, and I'm like, that's what I'm after. That's what I'm chasing down. Is that little nugget that I'm trying to uncover. Because I've got a lot of time to think about my perspective and my reaction to what I've faced and what I've been through. Like I got a lot of nuggets and little gold that are buried into there. So when I reveal one and someone gives me that reaction, like, oh, that impacted me so much. Or they'll talk to me after the talk and be like, damn, this broke it down for me. For instance, growing up, Julian, and I never made my bed ever growing up. Okay, never made my bed. As a speaker now, one of the biggest hacks I have is make your bed in the morning. And the amount of people that have told me that, Dan, I make my bed now because of you from your talk, like, is ridiculous. But it's a symbol for life and a symbol for your day and a symbol for like how you're getting yourself started and your best foot forward, if that makes sense. So I think those little comments there probably make what's worthwhile for me, Julian.
Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting about making the bed. I think that the US Marines or some elite group talk about the simplicity of making your bed and creating that mindset of completing tasks, doing things, and almost overcoming things almost immediately as you start the day. There's something about that. There's some real power in that. Is there any? It's interesting when you talk about the impact you have with the gems you might share on stage. Have you? When you do your talks, is there things that you learn yourself as you're explaining things, as you are unpacking it? Do you get those gold moments for yourself in those moments?
Yeah, I think we do a lot of Q&A. I like doing a lot of Q&A with my talks because I think that's the most natural part of it. I can't really, mind you, I've got my own talk tracks and my own perspectives that I will try to weed out through the Q&A session. I'll try to steer the conversation to that. But sometimes the questions are so off piece that I have to kind of go off piece to chase down the answer, if that makes sense. And that's kind of cool for me to explore that. So there's things that I will look to uncover on stage as well. It's not like I'm not set in how I respond to things, but it's I'm open to receiving it if it's out there to be found. If that makes sense, Julian.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it'd be helpful for the listeners to just almost go back to share that sort of your personal journey and the circumstances that led to your brain injuries. It'd be good to start there if you want to sort of share that and how you share that.
Yeah, for sure, Julian. So thanks so much for bringing that up. It's a real great topic to talk about. So I had a brain hemorrhage in 2014 in London, England. What was happening was I was having these headaches. They were getting really poorly over a few weeks. I was taking painkillers like candy for them. My head was pounding. It was getting atrociously bad. I went to A&E, which is accident emergency, as your group knows, but it's for those in North America, it's A&E is accident emergency. They thought it was vertigo and they sent me home. So I went home. I was in the tube the next day. Went to pick someone up from my friend in Notting Hill. On the tube over, my vision went black. I couldn't see anything.
Goodness me.
Then we waited the platform. After a few minutes, I came back. I went back to A&E the next day. There's something wrong here. You guys got to check this out. Ran the same test. We think it's vertigo again. But they told me on the way out, if the headaches were to continue, I could always get my eyes checked in an optometrist, right? I was like, okay, cool. That sounds good. Headaches came back next day, like ferocity I haven't felt before. And I found myself in Mr. Patel's chair, the optometrist. He was midway through the exam when he stopped the exam. He excused himself from the room and he came back a few minutes later with a sealed envelope and he gave that to me. He goes, you need to go directly to Moorfields Hospital, which I did. Well, Julian, tell a lie. I stopped at home first to grab a Jack Reacher book by Lee Child as I figured I'd be in for a bit of a wait. A phone charger and a bite to eat. Made my way to Moorfields Hospital. They ran the same test and asking me out to Charing Cross Hospital. It turns out I had a dangerous buildup of pressure in my brain caused from a non-cancerous cyst in my head. Turns out I required emergency brain surgery tomorrow. Turns out my world's about to change altogether. So, a frantic back and forth with folks in Canada. Left with the last text message that I wrote to my mom being, "I'll see you soon, Mom. Think I'll have a new haircut next time I see you."
Is that your sort of your humor on life, how to deal with things?
Yeah, dark humor is what I go through here, Julian, and it's so mom's in the air flying to London on June 21st, 2014. I'm on the operating table. Something goes horribly wrong, and I have a massive bleed in the brain, a brain hemorrhage. They think the cyst burst when they operated. So my mom lands and finds I'm in critical condition. I was in a coma for 4 weeks. I was in and out of consciousness for months after this. Things were dicey, touch and go. When all was said and done, I was learning how to walk, talk, and smile again. And that's where my life kicked off, Julian. But yeah, dark humor is definitely what's carried me through this process. I'll be honest with you, Julian. That's a big part of my vibe these days. Real dark, real sinister, real gnarly stuff.
Just take us back to when all that, you were blacking out, you were getting headaches and going backwards and forwards to the hospital. What was going on? Because, I guess trying to relate this to people who might be not facing exactly what you're facing, but they might be facing some challenges that may feel slightly uncertain, slightly, not entirely sure what's going on. How did you sort of navigate that retrospectively when you look back on that? I mean, did you do that well, or is there some things you learned from that point? Just to understand what was going on in your mind at that point before you went under the operating table.
Yeah, well, I knew something was wrong, and that's the biggest thing. Like, I trusted my gut. Went to A&E twice. They sent me home twice. The optometrist is the one who caught this, right? But I knew something was wrong, and I went to the optometrist. If you know your body well. Like, I trust my body now instinctively. Like, I believe that full-heartedly. You got to trust your gut and just go with how you feel and what you feel is right. I knew something was wrong here. The vision on the tube going off, like, that's not casual. That's not a chill vibe. That's like, I was terrified, man. Like, that goes in the tube. Like, what do you mean? I can't see? I got on the platform and waited for a few minutes. It came back, thankfully. Went back to A&E the next day and like, look, there's something wrong here. We can't see anything wrong with our tests. Okay. And then optometrist caught this, right? So like, trust your gut is what I'm saying. Like, that's what you got to do. Always trust your gut. You know your body better than anyone else.
So when you woke up after 4 weeks, you're in a coma. Again? I mean, I don't know what you felt or what you saw or observed at that moment in your whole body. What was going on? Give us a flavor of the insights that were going on internally with you.
Yeah, thanks. So I woke up with my mom, dad, and brother on the bed, kind of trying to communicate with me, and I'm trying to talk to them, but I can't talk. I had a tracheotomy removed, and it took me a few weeks to get my voice box back, which is another story I'll tell you in a few minutes. But I'm trying to talk, but I can't talk, and I go, get me a pen and paper. And they give me a pen and paper, and I write on the pen and paper, I go, get me out of here. And I show it to Cam, my brother, and I go, you, get me out of here, bud. I had tubes coming out of me. My one eye is wonky as hell. Little did I know I'd be in the hospital for months after this, but I was like, this looks really expensive. I was a Canadian living in London. I wasn't sure I'd be covered by the medical space. I was, because I had a European passport. But I'm thinking my first thought is get the hell out of this hospital, man. This looks like a bad vibe. But going back to talking, Julian, if you don't mind, I'll share this one story about learning to talk again. So initially, the doctor said I wouldn't be able to speak because my vocal cords got chewed up from the tracheotomy and the breathing tubes that were put down my throat, and like it was really chewed up, and my vocal cords were gone. So it looks like he's not going to be able to talk again. And I had a Kiwi nurse, and she was a tough old gal, and she took me down to the park, and kids be playing football across the park, and she goes, Dan, those kids across the park, they don't think you're good enough to talk, Dan. They don't think you're good enough to talk. And I kind of found out that's a trigger for me, and I found my voice pretty quickly, and I yelled some profanities. I was begging your listeners, but I found my voice. But like, you got to kind of find out what motivates you and ride that wave. That little thing that she did unlocked a huge part of my vibe, is that, I'm really motivated by that. You don't think I'm good enough to be here or do this? Like, let me show you I'm good enough to be here. Now, that motivation is not a very holistic and happy place to have it come from, right? It's quite dark and twisted and spiteful and vengeful, but like, don't judge the motivation. If it works, ride that wave down, baby. I've now tried to transition my vibe to more of holistic and service, because when motivation comes from spite and like proving you wrong, it burns out after once you prove them wrong, the motivation's gone, like it was never there. But now I'm trying to transition that more to service, and that's why I'm doing the speaking and the podcasts, share my perspective and share my vibe, and just like, your success is my success, and that way my motivation doesn't end when our conversation stops. It will carry on for years to come. When I'm trying to beat you, Julian, with all due respect, once I beat you, it's over.
That's interesting, isn't it? That almost that motivation she was instilling in you was, trying to prove them wrong, basically, wasn't she? She was trying to make a trigger you to almost your ego and to try and sort of knock you down. And again, that's probably not helpful. But where do you think she got that? I mean, obviously it was helpful because it came a start for you. And obviously, where do you think she got that from you? Is that in terms of her interaction with you and you could actually work with that? Because I know when I'm coaching somebody, I won't use that, but I might bring challenge to people in terms of what they're doing, why they're doing it. It's not just about encouraging people and helping people to flip the script or reframe things. Actually, sometimes it's challenging their thinking, challenging their decisions, just to make sure they do things and do the right thing for them. Do you think she was just going to come in and was challenging you?
No, I mean, my parents built this lovely like little dossier of me, like this little pamphlet, because I couldn't talk for a while, right? So I was like this blob on the bed, like, who is this guy? And they created this little dossier like about Dan MacQueen. Who is Dan MacQueen? What does he do? What does he love? What's he passionate about? And in there, I guess a lot of sports came up, and I played a lot of sports, pretty active guy, was quite competitive. And I guess she kind of riffed on the fact that she knew I was a competitive sportsman and like played lots of sports, and like that would probably be a trigger for me, and it sure as hell was. Like, tell me I'm not good enough to be here, and I will bend the world to prove you wrong, man. Like, I will bend the world to prove you wrong. And like that works so well to get me going and get me motivated. Like, I yelled across the park, and the voice came back, and she was like, I'll get him talking. And she made me sing, man. I wasn't talking, I was singing. I was like yelling across the park. It was wild.
What a wonderful nurse. So insightful.
Wonderful nurse. Bold call on her part, though. I'll be honest. It's a pretty bold move on her part, but it worked well.
And in some ways, you probably got her to thank that she kickstarted something. So what do you think in terms of motivating people who are in that place where whether they lose hope or they just can't see the future of what may happen or overcome something? What do you think is a better motivation?
Interesting question. I would say don't judge the motivation at all. Don't try to make it come from an area that you want to come from. Ride the wave that comes at you. There'll be certain waves that come your way in your direction. Like, you can ride this wave down to get out of here, or you can hang tight. And like, if you're waiting for the wave because this is not the right wave for me to ride, well, there may not be another wave for a while, bud. Ride the waves you got. If it's a spiteful, vengeful, I don't think you can do this, prove you wrong kind of vibe, ride that wave down. As I mentioned, I'm now trying to transition that motivation primarily from like proving you wrong to now service. And that's been a very active approach because I watched the documentary The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it all, Julian, but it's quite big in North America. One thing I really noticed in that documentary is how spiteful and vengeful he was post-career, like life after. And like, I don't want to be this vengeful, bitter guy. Like, Michael Jordan's the best basketball player that ever lived, but like, he's a bitter old man. And like, I don't want to be that guy. Now, that's not to say like I'm on the same level as Michael Jordan. Your words, not mine, Julian. Your words, not mine. But I'm trying to be very proactive in how I approach motivation now and try to make it come from a more holistic place. But when you're in the thick of things, when you're fighting for your next one, don't judge the motivation. Ride the wave that comes and worry about lining up later on in life. So if you're in a dark place, just ride the motivation that comes to you. Don't try to make it. It's not from this place, because it's like you can't judge the motivation and you can't manufacture motivation to come from where you want. It comes from where it comes from.
Yeah, I talk a lot with my clients is to get real clarity on their purpose, because when things are tough or difficult, your purpose doesn't change. In essence, it's beyond you. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than the situation, and it can be a helpful motivator, North Star, to keep you going and encourage you. Just in terms of purpose, were you aware of your purpose pre-brain injury? And I'm interested to see what that was. If you were, you might not have been, I don't know. And then post-brain injury, what do you think your purpose is now?
Yeah, good question, Julian. Thank you. Pre-injury, no. My purpose in life was having a good time. I was out late nights, chasing girls, having good nights, late night parties, late for the party, not taking life too seriously. I was living abroad in London when this all happened, right? This all happened in London, England. I lived there for 10 years. So I was living life, enjoying life overseas. Post-injury, with 100% certainty, my purpose in life is to showcase a way through, to showcase how you can get through these difficult situations. I want to be the catalyst you can point to. Well, this guy made it through this. If he can make it, I can make it. I'm no better. I did these tests a little while ago, Julian. I'll share the story with you in your group. At this brain injury clinic in Surrey, BC, this world-class organization. Okay, they had some footballers over from the UK. The week before I was there, they couldn't tell me who it was because it was someone quite prominent in the UK football. For non-disclosure, they couldn't tell me. Okay, cool. But it's quite a well-known institution, right? They ran these tests to see where my brain was at after the brain injury. I was expecting there to be some big deficiencies. I've had 2 brain surgeries, right? Some big gaps in my brain scans. I was expecting this, right? The results came back as shockingly average. Well, average, they told me average. And I go, well, shockingly average, because
shockingly average.
I added the shockingly. They didn't tell me it was shockingly average, but I wrote in my mind, I'm shockingly average. I'm shockingly average. And I was a bit dejected by this because I've recovered so well, Julian, and I've done so well against all odds that I would have thought there'd be some big outliers, some big hairy outliers of well, you're phenomenal in this area, but you're really lacking in this area. But shockingly average for a 2 brain injury survivor guy. But thinking about it more and more, I realized, that's perfect, because that means my success is accounted mostly to mindset. I've been nose over the toes of the board, toes over the nose of the board the whole way down. Lean into this mindset with full steam and making this work, which means I'm no smarter than you or anyone else on this call. I've only been successful because I've leaned into my mindset full stop. And that means that you can do it too. And that means that you can do this too. No matter what happens to you, you can do this, because I'm no smarter than you. I'm no more gifted, no more talented. I'm just maybe more driven and more focused. But you can do that. You focus and mindset and drive. You can train that, really, I think. Which is my mission in life now is to show you a way through. And we'll talk about it later on in the call today, Julian. But the next step, right? My life is about getting you to take the next step. Everything I do in my life is about taking the next step, and you're stronger than you think. And I'm going a bit ahead of you here, Julian. I realize that. But I had eye surgery maybe 2 months ago, Julian, for trying to correct double vision, which I still have today. 3rd surgery I had in the eyes, first one on the left eye, and it's changed my whole perspective of life. It's life was like this, and now it's like this. But it's really thrown me off, because now I'm turning my head a lot to the right. I'm sorry if I'm doing that now on the call, but I can only really see with my right eye at this parameter here. And we found out yesterday that it's because my left eye moved a little bit. It's got some movement in it, which just made my brain focus on it too much. And my dad asked me initially, well, Dan, do you regret having the eye surgery? And right off the hop, I said, of course, it's changed everything. It's changed everything. But let's experience in life, upon reflection, I realized, you know what? I don't regret having the surgery, because I took the next step. And that's all you can do in life, is take the next step. When there's an opportunity to take a step, you got to take the step, because that's what fuels the improvement, the process, the grind, and the improvement is taking that next step. And that's how I've gotten as far as I have today. So I don't regret that at all, because I'm only here because I took the next step.
Mm.
And I think like that's such a beautiful way to look at life, is always take the next step. And even though it's a bit of an adjustment now, it's going to take some time to get used to this. We're not closing the door on more surgery. We might have more surgery in the eye, but like right now it is what it is. And like I've got to make my peace with that. And I have, because I've taken the next step, and my mindset is I'll always take the next step. So that's a long-winded way to say my purpose is to show you to always take the next step, Julian.
Mm. I like that. I love that, and I love it how it's so linked to how you've worked this through. And just going back to when you woke up and you realized you couldn't speak, how did you get to that place of thinking, I'm just going to take a step here, I'm just going to move forward, and whether that's starting writing or get me out of here? What was going on in your mind at that point, and how did you, I guess, navigate that probably shock that you couldn't speak and it found it really difficult? Because often we get into situations where it can be really difficult and really tough, and almost that shock response and fight or flight, the fact that you wanted to just get out of there because it was just a bad vibe. So how did you then navigate from that point onwards?
Yeah, so like let me be clear. Like I've got these whimsical expressions and like mindset perspective now of me joining the dots, looking back on life. When you're in the moment, when you're in the thick of things, you're not thinking about like, oh, what's the lesson here? Like you're looking about how to survive. Don't try to make it about the lesson. Like make it about surviving, get through the moment, and then connect the dots when you look back at it once you're through the initial situation. 100% I was looking to survive and make it through this, but I knew early on that it was not what happened to you, but how you think about it that matters. Because the brain injury didn't kill me. I couldn't speak for a while, but I got the voice back. But like I realized, like, look, you've had a brain hemorrhage. You're not in a good way. Like this is not an ideal situation, but like you're still alive. You're still kicking, which means you can navigate this space. But it's what you think about it that matters, right? And that's one mindset that I did allow myself to have in the hospital, in the thick of things. It's like, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters. That's an Epictetus through line, like a Stoic philosopher. But I think that's so key for having this, because that means you can navigate this, but you can't allow yourself to go down what I call the pity spiral. And that's the woes me, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. Because Julian, you're right, it's not fair. Like, but life's not fair.
No.
Like life's not fair, and life doesn't care what you think about it. It doesn't matter. Like, oh, this never happens to my friend over here. All this crap's piling up on me, but like, it doesn't matter, because wishing something didn't happen is not an adequate way to resolve it or get through it. Wishing something didn't happen is not like a proper way of getting through this, right? So I describe my recovery like a W, Julian. The first setbacks down here, I recover back up to like getting back to work. So if a year of rehab, year of occupational therapy, vocational therapy, speech and language therapy, I'm clawing my way back to work. I get back to work 2 half days a week, right? We're jumping ahead a little bit here, sorry, Julian. I realize that. A year of working to get back to work for 2 half days a week, right? And then I don't show up for the tube one day. I meet my mom at the tube before work, and I go to the tube, and she go off on her walk. And she goes back to my flat and finds me unconscious on the floor, lying there like out of sorts, and we call 999, and I go to the hospital, and I have emergency brain surgery. And I wake up for the second time in the hospital to hear the beeping noise of the heart rate monitor going off. Beep, beep, beep. What happened? What happened? What happened? Well, Dan, you had a second brain injury. Second brain surgery, rather. And I go, oh, my progress is watching you. Yeah, we got the blockage. So like that second W is not where the first W was, Julian, but much lower. Because I had been working for a year to get back to the office, a year to get my life forward and away from this dark place I was in. And it took everything to keep my mindset pure at this stage. Like, don't be down the woes me spiral, the pity spiral, I call this. Like, avoid that at all costs if you can, because I don't know how you recover from that, because I never allowed myself to go down the woes me spiral, if that makes sense, Julian. Like, I can't speak to that because that's not my experience. I knew if I went down that road, it'd be really difficult to pull it out of that dive, that nosedive. So I think it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. Like it's not, you're not that special, you're not that gifted. Like it's just happening. You're not special to have it happen to you, right? It's just happened. It's like get over yourself and crack on. Like it's just.
I came up with a phrase. I was doing a talk on resilience, and this phrase just popped out in my head. It was, your life is unfair, but it's not personal, and it helps people reframe that. Just what you're saying there. Literally, things will happen to us, but it's not against you. It just happens. It's not a personal thing, and it helps us think, okay, and it reframes it in a positive way. And I think also not to, as you say, not to go down that spiral of the pity and almost what I should have done, could have done, all this, because you're just getting held into the past. And that sounds very twee, doesn't it? Look at it as what are the lessons, what are the opportunities. But when you get there, that's what you need to start thinking. Because when you think that way, your mindset becomes a lot more positive, and you start to see the silver linings. You start to see those wonderful things that now, now I look at you, and you are now, and I love it how you said you're in service to other people. Now you're inspiring other people. You had two brain injuries that impacted your life, but now you are inspiring others. You're helping other people who, not with just brain injuries, I'm sure you are, but in terms of other life things and challenges, and probably having a greater impact than you were previously.
Oh, for sure. And Julian, I'm reminded of like this statistic that I heard that the odds of you being a human being are 400 trillion to 1. Okay. 400 trillion to 1, right? And I've got, you all got this, we're all given a hand of cards, right? This card was in my hand, right? I couldn't have done anything to mitigate this, right? It was going to come up no matter what. And they play this card, and he goes, hey, you have the brain hemorrhage. Live for a little while, play the second card, you have a second brain injury. Like, I'm not going to muck the whole hand because I don't like these two cards. Like, play the hand, man. The odds of you having a hand are ridiculous. Like, I love what you said there about it's not personal. Like, it's not personal, but it just happened. The card was in my hand. It wasn't personal to me, but it happened. So, yeah.
So talking in terms of, that sort of mindset of taking the next step, people might be listening right now who they've dealt a bad hand, or whatever you want to call it, some challenge, some difficulty. It might have been even creative. They might even created it themselves, potentially. What I guess lessons or learnings you found in that's helpful for people to take that next step? What things do they need to think about, a process or a way of thinking that will help them in those next steps?
Yeah, this is going to bite a bit hard for some people, for sure. I'm going to tell what I'm going to say. I'm going to say when I say it next. Acceptance is the most important thing you can do. Now, that's not admitting defeat or accepting what happened to you in a negative space. It's just saying this is what it is. It's not personal, but it is what it is. The brain injury happened, you have to accept it. If you deny it, you can deny it for 6 months. And then 6 months later, you'd be square one. But I'm taking steps from this moment onwards, I can build myself up for the next 6 months. Acceptance is so key. And that's tough to hear because it's like, well, you don't know my story, Dan. It's like, yeah, look, I know. Tough shit. Like, it's like, it happens, man. But you got to accept it because you can't improve it unless you accept it. You can't take a step forward unless you accept it. If wishing something didn't happen is not an adequate way to resolve it. You have to accept it and then improve it. And that's tough to hear because it's like, you don't know my story, Dan. It's like, well, hey, man, look, it's tough. I know. But if you don't accept it, you can't improve it. Hope that makes some sense for you, Julian.
That makes perfect sense. I think that's just almost getting that reality situation, isn't it? A reality of where you're at, and then taking responsibility a little bit. I think often, we can almost want to shove the responsibility at somebody else's faults. I grew up in this family, or this happened to me, and we're not taking responsibility, are we? We're not sort of owning it, and therefore, if you don't own it, then you won't be able to deal with it and move forward.
It's interesting. I was moving back from London to Vancouver 2 years ago, and there's a kid at the airport, and I guess something was wrong with him because his dad was there to help him like move some bags and stuff, and he goes, There's an issue with the bags, right? And he goes, it's not my fault. It's not my problem. He goes, it's not my problem. And his dad's trying to get him like, no, but you're going to have to deal with this. And I wanted to speak up and like offer some perspective because I feel like I've got a special place to do this, but I kept my mouth shut because it's none of my damn business and it's probably really rude if I say something. But I go, look, mate, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. Like, it's not your fault the bags are misplaced or lost or going to some other place, but it's going to be your responsibility to figure it out. And that perspective, like, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility is so key.
Because it causes action, doesn't it? This is what we're talking about. It causes to move forward action to take those next steps. Otherwise, you end up staying still and doing nothing.
Yeah, like it's just like you're not that special, not that gifted. Like stuff happens in life. Like you got to adapt to it and deal with the consequences. Like it's I don't know. And this take a long time to learn this lesson, right? I'm saying this is easy to do for your listeners. Like don't be like, oh, acceptance, responsibility, like screw you, Dan. It's like, look, this took me a long time to learn these lessons, and it took 2 brain injuries to learn these lessons. What I'm telling you now, what I learned, like if I knew this at the start, I could have gone a lot further ahead than I am now. If I accepted that off the hop, it's just like, look, acceptance is key. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. Like it's not my fault the brain injury happened. No, but guess what? Here are your cards. Figure it out from now on. Like you got to start from this point on and move forwards. It's like if you can understand that, you can be much further ahead than you would otherwise be.
Yeah, I talk a lot about how resilience is not just about grit, determination, but about actually taking some time out to learn from the challenges or the failures or whatever you want to term them, and really do that learning loop. What have you found helpful for you? We've talked about sometimes in the moment of a challenge, a difficulty, it's not really learning. It's just being taking steps forward and dealing with it and accepting and take responsibility. How have you found those? I suppose, how have you learned those lessons? What do you do when you reflect? Do you reflect? Do you take some time out? Do you journal? What's your techniques that enable you to go back and think, okay, what did I learn? How can I learn from that scenario?
Well, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and like they ask a lot of questions on the podcast that are quite interesting. And I'm like, well, how would I answer that question? I think about this, and I'm like, well, I come up from this perspective, and like, I don't journal. I'm afraid I probably should. I've known a lot of people that do that, but it's not something I do. But like reflecting on that, and also swimming. I swim a lot, and swimming is wonderful because it's the only time in life where you don't have any outside influences. No music, no screens. No outside influence, save those pesky backstrokers, Julian. Those pesky backstrokers are a bit of a nuisance, but that's okay. You go in the pool and you just untangle stuff in your mind. And like, it's a wonderful place for you just to have some calm, some peace. And you just lap after lap. I've got a lap counter, which counts your laps. Does just what it says in the tin. But you untangle stuff in your mind and you think about one thing when you go in the pool, like, what about this? And lap after lap, you chip away at this idea, this problem, and you untangle it. That's how I've kind of addressed this and come to terms with this stuff. But I don't do anything like too formal in terms of like how to unpack my lessons and stuff like this. But it kind of gets teased out over time, if that makes sense.
And I guess doing sort of keynote speeches helps do that as well, because obviously you've got to create that and create the story and the lessons and obviously people, as you say, people asking you questions almost helps you redefine that and change it and tweak it and get even more nuggets of gold that perhaps you didn't realize until somebody's asked you a question that you never thought of before and think, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought from that point of view. Just as we finish, Dan, if somebody's facing a bit of a tough challenge right now, or they've been through quite a tough period, what advice would you give them to sort of keep going? What would be your counsel? And not that you know everybody's problems right now, but what would be your general counsel to somebody?
Like you got to fight, and you can't. If you stop fighting, I can't help you because that's the most important thing. You got to keep fighting, and it's tough, and it may look impossible odds. It may look impossible to get through this, but you got to keep fighting. By keep fighting, I mean just take the next step. There'll be like 2 options you can take: one easy, one hard. Take the hard one, make it work. Again, take the hard one, make it work, and just keep stacking up little wins. But keep fighting. Because you don't think this is going to break for you, right? Like I was hanging on by my fingertips. My fingernails on the wall. Second brain hemorrhage, man, like in the hospital bed, like you gotta be. I'm hanging on by my fingernails. Like, am I gonna make it through this? I don't know. I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna let go. I'm gonna keep holding on. Keep holding on, keep fighting, and take the next step. And like eventually it breaks. Eventually it breaks, man. And like I'm telling you, it does. And you can be like, well, you don't know my story, Dan. Hey, look, I don't know your story. You're right. But look at my story. Look what I've been through. And like I'll tell you what I've been through. And like it does break. But you gotta keep going forwards and take that next step, because if you don't do that, you're hooped and finished. And like you're saying no for someone else. Don't ever cancel yourself out before the world cancels you out.
Mm.
If I'm gonna die, I'm gonna be dying because I'm not good enough to do it, and not because I didn't try hard enough. So I'm going full tilt at this now, and we'll see what happens. But like, I'm never gonna die because I've given up myself. I'll die because I'm not good enough to do it.
Mm. Yeah, I like that advice. That's good. Just to keep keep pressing on, keep taking those next steps, whatever they may be. Your story is very inspirational, Dan, and it's been great having you on the show. And I appreciate you sharing. And there's probably lots you could share. And it's very inspiring, and I appreciate your time. If people want to sort of connect with you, get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, thanks, Julian. So MacQueenDan.com, MacQueen Dan.com, and MacQueen Dan across the socials, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, if you want to connect there.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today, Dan.
Appreciate you, Julian. Thank you so much.